You see the seal, the court is not in session, to get you caught up on what we just saw. The jury did not see, nor did it hear the arguments with regards to whether or not Maurice Hall was in the car with George Floyd at the time. His attorney saying he does not want to testify, and if he is called to testify, he will invoke his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. I want to bring in our Dr. Laura right now. And Dr. Laura, I'm not a lawyer. I sometimes try and play one on television, but you are the expert. So basically what we are hearing is a witness saying that anything I say literally can and will be used against me.
Yes, and he has that constitutional right not to be forced to testify and self-incriminate himself. Now, what's interesting, Del, is Eric Nelson made the argument when they were discussing this motion earlier that Derek Chauvin also has the right to a complete defense, and part of that defense is having Maurice Hall testify. But what the Constitution says is you can't trump one person's rights to grant another's, and so once he invoked that Fifth Amendment, Maurice Hall, there is really nothing that Eric Nelson could do. The judge has to honor Maurice Hall's constitutional rights. Derek Chauvin's constitutional right to a complete defense does not trump Maurice Hall's rights. And so that's really the basis of Judge Cahill's decision, and he made the right call.
And also, since we see Maurice Hall, he is there in the red shorts, we see him, he is at the scene, it can't be argued that anything that he might want to say would have been withheld from the court record. So is this a matter that will hold up on any type of appeal if the defense were to say that Derek Chauvin didn't get a fair trial because Maurice Hall's testimony was squashed?
Yes, it will hold up on appeal because, again, that is his constitutional right. And so Judge Cahill made the right legal call. And it's also important to note that if he tries to appeal that, the defense team, about Maurice Hall not being forced to testify, we saw in the testimony yesterday, Officer Chang, he was the park police officer that came to assist Derek Chauvin at the scene with George Floyd. And we saw his body cam footage, and we heard Maurice Hall in real time. We saw him at the scene. We heard him answering Officer Chang's questions. So it's not as if his testimony didn't get in some way, meaning it was some way introduced to the jury. And so I think any options at trying to appeal successfully by the defense team will simply fail with respect to Maurice Hall's testimony not being allowed.
I want to bring in civil rights attorney James Cook right now, and I have a question specifically for you, Mr. Cook, which is that as I was listening to Maurice Hall talk to the judge and as I was listening to his attorney, I got that underlying feeling of mistrust in the black community, specifically in Minneapolis, but it translates into communities across the country, that they don't trust law enforcement for anything. Was I seeing something that wasn't there?
I think you're spot on. I think that is the best way to describe it. And as a black man, how could you trust it at this point? You know, we were in the middle of witnessing the George Floyd trial unfold. And right smack in the middle of it, another black man is killed, unarmed, and clearly due to an escalation of the police. Why would he trust it? And you're seeing all that play out in the process of the defense trying to bring him into the trial. So yes, you are spot on, and that is the exact same thing that I saw.
Dr. Laura, I brought this up on Start Your Day, which is that we as journalists, specifically as black journalists, have always been held to a higher standard. And in this case, it's a higher standard of justice. You have an officer now, not charged, but basically implicated in the shooting of Daunte Wright, who may be facing charges. How does she get a fair hearing? Because we were talking about Maurice Hall just a moment ago, but the scales of justice are tilted so far out of whack, nobody is getting a fair hearing these days.
It is true about the difficulty in finding a jury that can be impartial to ensure that people are getting a fair hearing. This particular police officer, the way the law is set up, we have motions for change of venue. So it might be in her best interest for the court system to move any case that is filed against her out of Hennepin County into another more rural part of Minnesota where it may not have as much of an emotional impact and reaction on potential jury members. And so that's what venue is for, to move to a less or rather a more impartial jury area. And so she has those options, but to completely insulate her and say that, we're going to guarantee you that no juror is going to have already formulated an opinion, it's just not the world we live in. We saw that with the jury selection process in the Derek Chauvin trial.
Yeah, I was specifically concerned about whether or not she gets a fair hearing when it comes to whether or not she should be charged, because the rhetoric on both sides is so heated. It's going to be very difficult for anybody to really get a fair hearing. And your thoughts on that, Dr. Laura?
Yes, so allegedly we're hearing reports here on the ground that they're supposed to announce today whether or not they're going to press charges against her. Now, it would be very difficult to press murder charges because you need that intent element, but perhaps manslaughter charges against her. And the question is, who's going to make that call? She says it was an accidental shooting. There's pressure to bring criminal charges against her. I think that they will, but the way that our system is set up, Dell, is that, yes, the cards are stacked against her, but it's for the jury to decide whether or not those charges are valid. But let the legal system work. Let the process work. Let's not, try to take shortcuts or circumvent process. That's what upsets people. Let the process play itself out, and they hopefully need to go ahead and press charges against her.
They always say sunlight is the best disinfectant. We are going to take a short break. We're going to be right back. You're watching BNC's live gavel-to-gavel coverage of the Derek Chauvin murder trial. Stay with us.